Welcome back. Just in case you're just joining us, it is now 8 minutes past 8 o'clock in the morning here on MTV and Magic FM. If you're just joining us, you missed our first conversation with Mr. Victor Philip speaking to the urgency of vaccination and our current COVID status and what's happening with the numbers and the importance of us being responsible and getting vaccinated if we have not gotten the vaccine yet. We're now into our second conversation for the morning. A very familiar face, very familiar voice. This morning he's speaking, though, on the environment, the importance of the hard work of the ozone unit. We're speaking this morning with Mr. Leslie Smith. He's head of the National Ozone Unit attached to the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Smith, good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning indeed, and a pleasant good morning to all of your viewers. Nice to be on your program.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to have you. This morning we're speaking about a recent workshop, virtual stakeholder engagement that the Ozone Unit held. Very important in that of validation. Speak to us about what happened, so about the event, the aim of the event, and of course what we intend to achieve from it.
So thank you again, and let me just put into context the exercise that we had on Tuesday, which was a data validation workshop. In 2010, we conducted a similar workshop or similar data collection exercise to collect data from the refrigeration and air conditioning sector so that we'll be able to build a project to phase out ozone depleting substances that are consumed here in Grenada. So that first phase of the project went from 2013 to 2020. And the Montreal Protocol, for which we are signature to, gave us some timelines to phase out these ozone depleting substances. So we've completed phase one of the project. So now we have to do phase two, which will take us up to 2025. And so we had to do another re-examination of the sector to collect the new data and to use that data to develop another project, which is the phase two, to phase out the remaining ozone depleting substances. So a consultant was hired to do that exercise. They were able to conduct a very in-depth data collection process. And so they presented that data to all of the stakeholders of the refrigeration and air conditioning sector in form of a data validation workshop. And that workshop essentially was to present the data and so that the stakeholders, the technicians, the importers, the customs, the Bureau of Standards, etc., would look at the data, review the data, discuss the data, and to determine the validity of the data to ensure it is accurate and correct, because that is the data that will be used to develop the project for the phase out of the remaining substances.
Okay, that's very interesting, because now we have gone to the first phase. What was the first phase about?
Was from 2013 to 2020. And under the Montreal Protocol, developing countries like Grenada were required to first of all establish a baseline, and that baseline was based on the average consumption of 2009 and 2010. So once we set that baseline, the Montreal Protocol said to us that in the year 2013, you have to freeze your consumption at the baseline level. So we were not allowed to consume more than what that baseline was. And then in 2015, we had to reduce our consumption by 10%. And then in 2020, by a further 35%. So we've just reached a stage where we had an obligation of 35% reduction in consumption by 2020. And I'm sure your next question would be, how did we perform as against these baseline and these targets that were set by the Montreal Protocol? So I don't want to preempt your questions, but I can tell you, we have done a fantastic job here in Grenada, Ozone, in terms of how we've been able to meet and surpass those targets. And let me put it into proper perspective for you. So in 2015, we were supposed to achieve a 10% reduction in consumption. As of January 1, 2015, we actually achieved 75% reduction in consumption. In 2020, we were supposed to achieve 35% reduction in consumption. And as January 1, 2020, we were at 79%. Our next target is in 2025, where we are supposed to reduce by 67.5%. But already, we are at 79%.
Yes, we've already exceeded.
So we are way ahead of where we're supposed to be in 2025. And that puts into proper perspective the performance we've been able to produce here in phasing out these ozone depleting substances.
How do you measure these achievements? I know that it involves our refrigeration, so it's our refrigerators, our AC and so units. How do you measure it? How do you know for sure that that we come up to that 79% now when we have already exceeded our 2025 milestone?
Right? We collect data on the imports of the substances that are brought in to service this equipment. And our data shows that there is a gradual decline to allow us to achieve that 79% over these years. Secondly, we also look at data on installed equipment that use these substances. And this is what the startling information is that we revealed from the survey. The survey indicates that in 2010, we had installed 18,925 pieces of equipment that use ozone depleting substances. And now today in 2021, we only have 285 pieces of equipment that consume these substances. So we moved from approximately 19,000 pieces of equipment to just under 300 pieces. So the dependence on the substance has gradually, drastically been reduced to allow us to achieve that 79% phase down of these substances.
Yes, I think we will not doubt this now, because you will need the substances to be able to maintain them. And if it has decreased, then it means that we are moving in the right direction. That's excellent news. Going back to the workshop that was held, the virtual workshop that was held on Tuesday, it was a validation workshop. The data was shared with our main stakeholders in the sector, so that we can now move from validation to now starting with the framework. Move us from that point, the information presented, the reception from our stakeholders, and where do we go from here?
Right. So after we have validated this data, the consultant now will have to engage the National Ozone Unit to look at what activities, implementation activities that we need to continue doing, or what new activities we need to employ to phase out the remaining ozone depleting substances. So the National Ozone Unit will be in a position to say, hey, we need to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z to be able to do that. And they would use that information and develop a project proposal with all of these activities. And then that is submitted to the Multilateral Fund Secretariat of the Montreal Protocol for financial assistance and financial approval. And once that is done, the monies will be sent to an implementing agency like UNEP or UNIDO or one of them, and executed by the country to phase out the remaining substances. So the consultant now is required to write up this project after having further consultation with all of the stakeholders, including the National Ozone Unit, and then present that project to us. We would submit it to the funding people for approval. And once the approval has been granted, then the project is implemented.
Smith, this is a very near and dear topic to you. I think we know you from the time we know you. It is in the ozone unit. You have traveled the world because of this. Exposure, it cannot be measured. What you have gained from this time within that call, and now, and of course with the whole shift to climate change and the way the environment has been affected over time because of our behavior as humans, you have gained extensive knowledge on this whole topic. As it relates to a shift in our behavior as a people, as it relates to, yes, I know that you're working, sharing, and we are phasing out. The evidence is there to show that we are phasing out these dangerous emissions in our environment. Yes, all the substances that we are trying to get rid of. The shift, though, by our people, because I know you'll be able to compare it from before to now. What are your thoughts on this? Is it encouraging? Do you think that we will get to that stage where we can say that our people now are our own environmental advocates?
That's very interesting, because we have some very good news to share in this regard. But before that, I just want to say that I've been doing this job for the last 18 years. And so I've gained vast experience. As a matter of fact, I've represented Grenada at every level of the Montreal Protocol and sat on several committees, co-chaired several of the big meetings and so on. And so I have a lot of experience in this area. With regards to the results and the successes of this effort, the Montreal Protocol has been heralded as the most successful multilateral environmental agreement. And the reason for that is that over 99% of all ozone depleting substances have been phased out since the protocol was ratified in 1987. And so the results are there to show. In so doing, the atmospheric scientists are now predicting that by the middle of this century, by 2050, 2060, the ozone layer would return to pre-1980 levels, meaning that the ozone layer would have healed itself. And that is because of the global effort of all countries, including Grenada, in phasing out these substances. But further to that, in 2016, the Montreal Protocol ratified or agreed to what is called the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, whereby in phasing out these ozone depleting substances, gases were introduced that were not damaging to the ozone layer, but was causing global warming. But the ratification of this agreement means now that the Montreal Protocol has taken on board the phase down of these new chemicals that are contributing to global warming. And the projections are that if there is successful implementation of this Kigali Amendment to the protocol, that 0.5 degrees Celsius of global atmospheric temperature can be reduced by the end of the century, and thereby contributing to the 1.5 to stay alive that the Paris Accord and others are trying to achieve. So the Montreal Protocol is not only an ozone treaty, but it's also a treaty for the climate system, because the Montreal Protocol in phasing out ozone depleting substances have been also able to phase out greenhouse gases, because some of these ozone depleting substances are themselves greenhouse gases. And there are some estimates that indicate that the Montreal Protocol have been able to phase out 8 times more greenhouse gases than the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Accord has been able to achieve. So there are a lot of success stories for that, and it is well documented that the Montreal Protocol is the most successful multilateral environmental treaty on record.
Great. I think that is well received news. We have heard for so long about the damage to the ozone layer, and we thought that it was the end for us. Now that our actions are changing because of that threat, and we see now that it can actually reward us in immeasurable ways, and some of us may not, we may not be the ones experiencing it, but we know our children and our children's children will. And I think that's the reason for all of this, that we can protect our tomorrow, our future. So, Mr. Smith, I think congratulations, or rather gratitude to you and your team at the Ozone unit here in Grenada must be commended for the hard work. Must be commended for the hard work, because it is because of your advocacy, your representation, and we must say not just representation at the highest level, that today, while we may be a dot, and we always speak to ourselves as this, a dot, but if every dot contributes, at the end of the day, we have a big cloud, don't we, that will eventually start raining problems.
Above our weight, in the sense that we are a very small island, a developing country with economy in transition, but yet still we make our mark at the highest international level. So we definitely punch above our weight. And to crystallize that further, Grenada has been a trendsetter in several areas. We are actually the first country in Latin America and the Caribbean to have commercially available air-conditioned units that use natural refrigerants. As a matter of fact, we have been exporting these to other Caribbean countries. We have had interest from the entire Latin America. We have had interest from several international communities. We have per capita the largest amount of trained technicians in natural refrigerant technology. We are the 3rd country in the Caribbean region to ratify the Kigali Amendment. And so we have been able to lead in several areas, several fronts, in terms of what we do here to protect the ozone layer. And so very often, the rest of the region use our efforts here as best practices in their countries because of the successes that we've had here. So I want to say at the same time that we must praise our local stakeholders, because they have been the functional units and the contributing factors to allow us to achieve those successes. So people like the Grenada Customs and Excise Division, the refrigeration and air conditioning technicians, the importers of refrigerating and air conditioning equipment, the Grenada Bureau of Standards, the Department of Trade, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and several others who have engaged with us and allow us to achieve those great performances. We must give them the full commendations.
Yes, I agree. It's a team.
because everybody have to play their part in this. You know that if we're going to speak of achievements, then whenever you achieve, then we expect more. Once you give us and we recognize that it is working, then you know we will be asking for more. So I would hasten to add now plans moving forward outside of the document that I know you're waiting on the consultants to now prepare, the proposal of activities that would now assist us in getting to our 2025, or rather continue to surpass our milestones, and that of phasing out now the last part of the emission, the substances that are dangerous. What do you have in mind? Because I know you have been working with the schools. In the past, we have had those fairs where our children have had an opportunity to create some of these very environmentally friendly equipment using very little things, helping their creativity. And so what are some of the other activities that we can expect from the Ozone unit as we await that document? Because you know that you're not waiting on that document. We know that you're always working. So share some of those plans with us, because we know you do have them somewhere there to implement.
So I can give you on a very preliminary basis some of the ideas and plans we have at the National Ozone Unit as we move into phase 2 of the phase out of the remaining ozone-depleted substances. We're going to definitely pursue a review of all of the policies and legislation that we have in the sector. So there's going to be a new Ozone-Depleting Substances Act that is going to govern the whole sector and how technicians would be required to practice in the field. There's going to be licenses and permits for technicians to practice and for people to sell and store refrigerants. There's going to be a whole issue of fiscal incentives that would encourage people to move in the direction of ozone and climate-friendly technologies. We're going to continue our thrust with capacity development and the provision of equipment to our technicians in allowing them to recover and recycle refrigerants rather than vent them into the atmosphere. We're going to continue our capacity development with our customs officers to train them in how to mitigate against illegal trade in these substances and how to protect our borders from the unwanted importation of any of these unwanted substances. We are going to engage the Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority in setting up what we call a reclamation facility, whereby all of these old fridges and old air conditioners that may still have these gases in them, they will be able to remove the gases, clean them up, either resell them or store them or dispose of them. That is going to be a new addition going into phase 2. We have already established a communication strategy, so we'll implement that communication strategy. How do we get the message to the schools, to the layman on the street, to the homeowners, the home users, the people who interact with the use of refrigerating and air conditioning equipment? So that communication strategy, which has already been developed, will be implemented fully. And then we're going to have a monitoring and evaluating component where we can measure what we're doing, how successful it is, what we need to scale up, what we need to continue, how do we tweak, how do we monitor all of that. That is going to be included in that second phase of the project. And then further to that, we are going to address the replacement chemicals that I mentioned earlier, what we call the HFCs, those that are not damaging to the ozone layer, but are greenhouse gases. So we're going to do another project preparation for that. We have a much longer timeline to phase down these substances up to 2045. But in 2024, our efforts will be started in phasing down these substances. So we're going to start the preparation now for these other group of chemicals for their phase down. So this is, in a nutshell, off my head, some of the ideas that we have that we want to discuss with the consultant to include in our stage 2 of the phase out of the remaining ozone depleting substances.
Comprehensive approach. I think it's safe to say. I'm just going to recap from your review the policies. You start at the top, the license and permit that would regulate the sector. Incentives people to do this. Capacity development, it means that we have continuity. Solid waste, so we're getting rid of the garbage. We don't get to leave it there. So we don't have it, get them out of our homes and then they go to the dump site. And the same thing that we're trying to prevent there, that they're still at the dump site. The communication strategy. How does the ordinary man in Grenada get the message so that he can practice what's safe? Monitoring and evaluation, it goes through that phase where we get to tweak, we get to plan, we get to implement, we get to tweak, we get to evaluate. And then, of course, replacement chemicals. Mr. Smith, I don't think there's anything I can say but commend you and your team for continued hard work. And I think it is paying off. It is paying off. The view in this is perfect. It is right. We're not looking at it one way. We're trying to cover everything, all the bases in the approach to this. And I think it is a reason why we are reaping the rewards of being able to get our environment. No matter the daughter we may be, our contribution is definitely adding to the overall picture, which is earth and safeguarding our environment. Mr. Smith, we're just a bit out of time, but I will be giving you an opportunity to share some parting words with us. I want to say thank you for that information. It is encouraging news. It is encouraging news as we continue to live through this pandemic, while we recognize that the human aspect of things with COVID might be a bit depressing. The environment is still sending us some good news.
Thank you very much, Ozone. And my final words is that this is a collective effort, and so we need to merge the science with the technology, with the policy, and everything together to achieve this success. My message to Grenada at this point in time: we need to make informed decisions on the choices of technology that we use in our homes. We need to choose the right refrigerators, the right air conditioners, and the right substances that are not damaging to the environment. So ask the questions when you go to purchase a refrigerator. Is this one good for the environment? Is this one energy efficient? Ask the same questions when you go to purchase an air conditioner. Does this use natural refrigerant? Does this one has an inverter that would allow it to use less electricity, because our electricity comes from diesel, which has emissions associated with it? Ask those questions so that you'll be able to make an informed decision on the right technology choice that will help safeguard our environment. And the final thing, Ozone, is that on September 16th, it's been celebrated as World Ozone Day. And every year, the National Ozone Unit have a number of activities to commemorate this day. This year will be no exception. We still cannot indicate what these activities are yet, but definitely we would release that to the public in due course. And so we ask people to look out for our activities and to participate where possible in our World Ozone Day activities on September 16th.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. It was a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Information, I am welcoming this information. As I said, some good news in the midst of everything that's happening. If the environment is alive, then it means that we have a better chance at making it through all that's happening here. So to you, a pleasant day to you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure is mine, and you have a great day as well.
Thanks, and same to you. So we were speaking there with Mr. Leslie Smith, head of the National Ozone Unit attached to the Ministry of Finance, speaking about a validation. He was just updating us on a validation workshop, virtual validation workshop that was held on Tuesday. But we got so much more from that interview. Good news coming out from the healing of the environment in the ozone layer, that by 2050, that it might have healed itself. Isn't that great news? It is wonderful news. And Mr. Smith and his team out there, and all of Grenada, because we recognize that the actions of our people, it is definitely adding to that overall healing process. So let's continue to do what we need to do. Again, it goes back to that of responsibility, doing what is right, making informed decisions, as he told us a while ago, merging scientists' predictions and, of course, the evaluation to that of technology, and we being a lot more conscious as to what we do and how our actions or inactions affect this the overall environment. Others always being mindful that our actions have repercussions. So as we conclude this morning, as the final program for this week, we say thank you to both our guests, Mr. Victor Phillip and Mr. Leslie Smith, one speaking on vaccination and its urgency, the other on the National Ozone Units. Information, their work, what has been happening, and of course the great news that the ozone layer would actually be healing by 2050. The prediction is that we will be at a better place. To me, that is welcomed news this morning in the midst of all that's happening here in the spice. And I continue to implore our people, please, let us be responsible. Do what we need to do. You have not gotten vaccinated. We have options now. If you need to do so, go out there, find out more information, call the Ministry of Health. Ask, what are the pros and cons of taking either vaccine? You're asking for an option. We have options now. Let us go out there and get vaccinated. I am vaccinated. I am fully vaccinated. And I did it to protect myself and my family. Why are you doing it? Why haven't you done it? Remember, we have loved ones that can be affected by this pandemic. Let us think about them, not just about ourselves, as I said, our action or inaction. there are repercussions for them. So let us be responsible, please. If you know you have been in contact with someone who has tested positive or who is now in isolation, do the same. Do the same. You and your family go into isolation. I saw information that the NIS is also offering. There's a claim specific to that of the isolation, and so call the NIS, find out what is happening, call your employer, find out what is happening. Please don't let that need of being able to provide for your family be the reason why we continue to go deeper and deeper into this crisis of our numbers increasing. Let us be informed, do what we need to do to ensure that we safeguard this land and all the people that we love who lives here. So that's it from us today. On behalf of all our sponsors, Grenlec, we say thank you so much, and our other corporate entities that support Rise and Shine, the team, Chad, Sugars, and Tanya, another successful program. We say thank you so much to all the coordinators, Kishon, and everybody else who ensured that this morning was a success. We say thank you again. I am your host, Jocelyn Crosby. Please go on out there. Be safe today. It's another day for us to produce. But remember, let safety be our guide as we move on out, as our numbers continue to increase. And of course, we move deeper and deeper in this pandemic. Now, a true picture of what's happening is that the numbers are growing, and we need to find a way to keep them down. Adhere to the protocols, wear your masks, social distance, sanitize, do what we need to do to ensure that we are safe. Get vaccinated. Have a great day, everyone.
Rise and shine.